Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Jedley Magic on Twitter, and at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Our guest today is coming to us from Hong Kong. Her name is Michelle Sun. She is the author of First Time Coders. Before we invite Michelle in, we want to invite you to help us celebrate the new year in New Bedford, Massachusetts. That's right, Jedley's totally interactive Magic Circus will be returning back to the beautiful city of New Bedford, Massachusetts, back to the New Bedford Public Library to help celebrate the new year. December 31st. It's going to be a great time. The folks down in New Bedford call this City Celebrate, and it's always a lot of fun. There's always so many different family-friendly activities all around the New Bedford downtown area. They're all free, they're all family fun, and it is a great time. You can find out more by going to newbedfordguide.com. Joining us right now from Hong Kong, please welcome to the show the author of First Time Coders, Michelle Sun. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jed.
I really appreciate it. It must be early in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for getting up so early. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
This is a great subject, and it's interesting. You wrote this book, and you're targeting it for anybody from ages 4 to 18, and I imagine some real first-time coders, old people like me.
Yeah, we actually got a lot of readers that are about that age range as well.
Uh-huh. So tell us about what we're going to learn in First-Time Coders, please.
Yeah, so the idea of First Time Coder when I write it is that I started a kids coding school around Asia Pacific 6 years ago and grew it to one of the leading ones around the region. And across the past 6 years, I've heard a lot of similar questions from parents when they send their kids to our school, asking similar questions about when they should get started, what tools is the best for the kids from various ages, what exactly is coding, and what is defined as a good learning experience for coding. So First Time Coder breaks it down to part one, why is coding important, what is it relevant to for a child's development, and the second part is to break it down into age group where from 4 to 18 we split into every few years what kind of learning objectives they should have, and also tools that they can use and programming languages they can start learning coding with.
Now, just for anybody out there who is maybe as old as I am and not understanding what we're talking about, when we're talking about coding, we're talking about coding computers and robots and other electronic gizmos. Am I right?
Yeah. So computer programming is essentially a way to for human beings to communicate with computers. So when human beings talk to each other, we use human languages. And when humans talk to computers, we use computer programming languages. So anything that we're interfacing with the computer, it can be called programming. So in this case, in the book, we talk a lot about robotics. So we use either iPad or any tablets or the computer to code some sort of commands to control the robots. And the second one that's very common is to program on the computer with programs like Scratch or Python to create games and animation. And then the third one that's very popular also is mobile applications. So we can also create mobile apps and games to install into your Android and iPhones.
And these are skills that you can teach to 4, 5, and 6-year-olds?
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's just so many tools out there now that can be used to teach coding to such a young age. And of course, they're not going to be coding up, typing out a lot of complex command at that age. But really, like, even with robots that we picked and recommend in the book, they're able to learn the concept of programming, which is to break down a problem and to solve it step by step.
Now, I think that's where, because I imagine we've had a lot of folks on the show who are advocates for kids not being on screens and not being exposed to technology until they're older. And I imagine some of those folks, if they're listening, if they hear the idea of a 4 or 5-year-old coding, their head must be exploding. But you mentioned something that I think is really important, that a huge part of this learning how to code is actually learning how to break down and solve problems.
Yeah, totally. And we also addressed this issue of screen time as well in the book, that there are definitely a lot of concern and questions from parents about, what is the right amount of screen time and how to manage that, especially as the kids get older. And, maybe some kind of like a side point to your question is that we do believe that technology is just like any other tools out there. Like TV, when it first came out, a lot of people were paranoid about how that can impact a child's development, and it could be very evil to have TV in the house, stuff like that. And I do think that there's a lot of addiction when it comes to video games, and a lot of times kids probably play too many games than healthy. And at the same time, the book talks about ways to manage the screen time such that kids can be more self-regulated rather than like having a hard rule. So that's something that I strongly suggest parents to think about as well. After all, technology is not going away anytime soon. So, it's more important to be able to control, for a child to learn to control their usage, from a certain age. Sorry, what was your original question?
Oh, well, I just, before we get back to that, I absolutely agree with you. And I'd love for you to expand on that idea more of, it's so important to not only put limits on how much screen time our kids have, but it's more important to teach kids how to regulate that themselves. How do we do that?
One of the ways is when a child is around like such a young age, like 3 to like maybe under 8 or 9 years old, it's a bit challenging, and definitely discipline is still quite important. And one of the things that we start to encourage kids to learn, to start to differentiate is that what are they doing on the computer, or on any technology right now, right? To be conscious of, am I being creative on this device? And am I being a consumer on this device? And so the creator versus consumer mindset is something that we encourage parents to have a discussion with their child about. For example, unfortunately, I think a lot of times when adults use technologies outside of work is primarily for consumer or entertainment purposes, like playing a game or chatting with friends on messages, or checking friends' Facebook updates or Instagram. But for a child, because they actually, a lot of our students are very proficient with a lot of tools, not just with coding, but for example, video editing or photo editing tools out there, or even like sharing stories with friends. And so having that discussion with children about, hey, the past hour you spent on the computer, what exactly were you doing, right? Having that discussion, and some parents, we mentioned in the case study that some famous entrepreneurs in the tech industry actually encourage their child to have unlimited screen time if it is a creative pursuit. Let's say the child is really interested in editing videos or making games on, coding up games on Scratch, then there's no limit for them to spend on the technology device. And whereas if it's playing a game or anything that's entertainment or consuming content, then there's a limit. So teaching that from the beginning, that helped the child as they go into teenagers where they wouldn't listen to us anyways, then it's helpful to plant the seed early on.
And that's really, really important. And it touches home on a subject that's really important to me. Here in the Reading with Your Kids podcast, we're really advocating for parents to read with their kids throughout their kids' lives, from infants through teenage years, and to have discussions with those kids. And not only discussions about what the story's about, but also discussions helping them become more literate about what they're reading, and to also apply that to other media, music and movies and television, to become more literate when it comes to that kind of media that they're consuming. And what you're talking about is right in that ballpark, having kids become more literate, more aware of what they're doing with their screens. Are they consuming? Are they letting the technology control them, or are they using the technology to create?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so very, very important. How did you get into teaching kids coding?
Yeah, so my journey of starting to teach coding with kids actually start with me learning how to code after college, which is later than a lot of people that are in technology. And I was an economics major in undergrad, and I stumbled upon a tech industry even actually after I started working. And I was originally in finance industry and discovered that, oh wow, like technology entrepreneurs are actually changing the world through making awesome products. And I really think that that's really cool, and aspire to be one of them. And so like that was why I started thinking about technology. And when my first startup failed, I realized, okay, I really need to speak the language of the coders and to be able to understand what goes on behind the scenes for these products to work. So I took a boot camp in San Francisco actually to learn coding, and my first language was Python and then JavaScript afterwards as well. And so what really inspired me was that when afterwards I volunteered at a organization to teach coding for kids, and that was shocking to me that kids as young as 12-year-olds can actually learn coding really easily, and they can make apps and games within 1 hour within an hour of class. Mm-hmm. And I thought that, wow, I wish I actually started learning coding much earlier rather than like after college, and have that inspiration, to learn more from a young age. And so that's where I started, and I started with hosting just workshops and over the weekends, and I was still working full time, and it just grew organically over the years.
That's fascinating, and I really love that story because it touches on something that we talk a lot about here, the need and the importance for us as parents to encourage our kids to take chances and to try some things and to not be afraid to fail. And that's such an important thing because we're all going to fail at some point in our lives. And you were talking about your first attempt at business, at being an entrepreneur failed, but that didn't stop you. You picked yourself up. You started over again, and here you are. You have a successful academy that is teaching kids all throughout Asia, and that's amazing, and that's a great skill for our kids to learn, not only learning how to code, but also having the courage to go out there and try and to pick yourselves up when you make those mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that coding is the like that's the one of the most beautiful part about coding that I love when it comes to teaching kids is that it's not just like the hardcore, when us adults learn coding, sometimes it's very goal oriented that I think very few people learn coding for fun on their weekends, like after a full-time job. Whereas it's probably like for adults, like sometimes it's more, oh, well, I want to get better at my job or switch careers or even just like, it looks cool on my resume and whatnot. Whereas for children, because they're starting from such a young age, a lot of times coding is like what we see coding for children is a tool to empower them to actually be able to grow their creativity, not just on an analog platform, pen and paper like I grew up with, but now they're interacting with tablets and iPads from a very young age, sometimes as young as 2 years old. I see toddlers starting to play on the iPad, and that's just going to be the case more and more. And for coding, it actually returns that power for these children to create and express their creativity on these devices and not just consume contents like games and videos.
Yeah, we all understand that it's important for us to help our kids be able to express themselves and to be able to sit down and write a sentence and write a coherent paragraph, and that can lead to a story and an essay. And yeah, those things are real important. They're never going to go away, but we have all these new ways of communicating, and how much better will it be for our kids if they can not only sit down and write a great essay, but they can also have the tools to create a video that expresses that, or to create music that expresses those ideas and those thoughts, or to create a video game that can express their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that I also want to add about creating on technology that is so powerful also, like with coding and also all sorts of other platform as well, is that it's different from the analog creativity activities, like for example, drawing or painting or knitting or whatever that is doing in the physical world, is that when we create on the technology world, a lot of things are iterative, right? Like we can actually be creating, if we make a mistake, it doesn't really matter. We can just start over, or we can, create a new project, and it's not like a super big deal. And that's really great for kids because they are able to learn that, okay, well, I don't need to be so scared of making a mistake. Like, with painting sometimes is, for example, if I make one stroke wrong, like it's gonna affect the painting and it's hard to erase. And whereas for coding, it's very much like an experimental thing, and it really encouraged students to have that mindset. And I think that's really powerful to train them and to encourage them to experiment more.
Do you know, Michelle, I grew up I grew up with a typewriter, and when I had to write an essay for class, I had to get on that typewriter, and I could not make a mistake because I remember going 300-word essay to word 295. I make a typo, and I have to start all over again.
Yes.
And we don't need to worry about that now, and that's wonderful. I think a lot of, I'm thinking back to when my son was 5 years old, and my mom was still with us, and my son, he loved technology, and we had the CD-ROM stories that he loved a lot that were really interactive, and you could change the story based on how you interacted with the program. And so he became very quickly at 5 and 6 years old very comfortable with the computer. And I remember we got my mom a computer, and she went to some classes, and one day she was taking care of my son, and she was having trouble getting the computer to do what she wanted to. And my 5-year-old son went over and climbed up on her lap and touched a couple of keys and got things working. And instead of being amazed at what my son could do, my mother gets so frustrated. She said, "That's it. I'm never turning this thing on again." And I think that maybe out there some reluctance for parents to let their kids get into coding might just be that they're afraid of technology and they don't understand it, and they don't understand the pace at which it's changing, and maybe they're afraid that their kids are going to learn more than they have.
Yes, yeah, I think that's one of it's very understandable, right? Because we really grew up in a very different generation where, iPad and, all these smart devices are actually only less than 15 years old. And so I'm pretty sure most parents out there, hopefully they're growing up in a different generation than their kids. And so that's also one of the things that I addressed in the book, where in part one of our book, that, understanding that mindset, all the feelings, all the reluctance that come out of technologies and the next generation, that's something very understandable. And at the same time, we need to be aware of that and not have it, obstruct our next generation, our kids learning. And, I think technology can be wonderful. A lot of coders I know around me that have gone on to become very successful entrepreneurs or engineers, they started coding at, 12 years old. And so that's something that I think with this coming generation, it's going to be even earlier. And, it's not something that to be scared of. It's something creative, and to encourage them. And we as adults need to do is to guide them and to encourage them and to make sure that they have the right mindset and skills to get started.
Well, I love this, and I really want to encourage folks to get out there and grab a copy of First Time Coders, because as you heard today, not only is it about helping your kids learn how to code, and that's wonderful, but it's also about encouraging their creativity and also teaching them the difference between being a consumer of technology and being manipulated by technology, and actually manipulating technology on their own and using technology to express themselves. And I think that those are some very, very valuable skills that we can teach our kids.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking today to the author of First Time Coders, Michelle Sun. Michelle, tell everybody where we can find out more about your book, and also to tell folks where they can find out more about your really exciting First Code Academy.
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon, and so in both the Kindle copy and also hard copy. And I'm at sunmichelle.com, and I'm on Twitter, Michelle L. Sun. And reach out to me. Love to hear about what you think of the book and any questions. Every time I receive an email from a reader, I try to respond as quickly as possible, and I love chatting with and hearing your feedback.
And we have listeners from all over the world. The podcast, talking about technology, the podcast has actually been downloaded to every single continent in the world, including Antarctica.
Wow.
And so we're really, really happy about that. And so we may have some listeners who are listening in different parts of Asia. What countries are you in where folks can actually attend First Code Academy?
Yeah, so First Code Academy, we're in a couple of cities in Asia, so Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan. And we also starting online classes as well later, in 2020.
That is exciting. Again, we've been talking to the author of First Time Coders, Michelle Sun. Michelle, thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you so much, Jed.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Melissa Sarno. She'll be here to celebrate her beautiful new middle grade novel, A Swirl of Ocean. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, whether it is nonfiction, fiction, middle grade, young adult picture book, board book, we would love to help you celebrate that book. You know, as an author, You are the person most responsible for letting the world know all about your book, especially if you are an independent author, a self-published author. And that can be daunting. It really can be, because you probably never trained for something like that. I mean, after all, you're a children's author. Well, you don't have to do it by yourself. We've created a wonderful program that has helped a whole lot of books stand out amongst the crowd of books that are published every single month. It's called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. Now, what we've done is we've created a panel of evaluators, their parents, their kids, and their teachers. And if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of different promotional tools that you can use to help celebrate your superbook. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. At the top of the page, you're going to see our Author Services button. Just click on that. It'll let you know the next easy steps. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. We want to thank Michelle Sun. Thank you so much for getting up so early to be on the show. I want to thank the people in the beautiful city of New Bedford. Be sure to come on out New Year's Eve to the city of New Bedford, Massachusetts. I've had the pleasure of performing on New Year's Eve in New Bedford, Massachusetts from at least 2004. Probably earlier than that. So for the past 15, 16, 17 years, it has been my place to celebrate the New Year, and it's always an awesome time. We hope to see you there. I also want to thank my producer, Fatima Khan. Be sure to check out her blog. You can find it at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. And, of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.